Amidst all the panic that the P-notes have caused, the MAT issue, the tussle with RBI, there's one voice of sanity always that we turn to, and that's Mr. Jayant Sinha, the Minister of State for Finance right here in North Block. Thanks very much for being with us. I gave you the introduction that you deserve. You are the voice of sanity. I first want to talk to you about the panic. It was code red on the Lal Street, almost over 500 points down. I know you're going to blame some part of the China sell-off on this, but largely the panic that we spoke to every market participant was on account of P-notes, was account of the SIT recommendations. I first want to ask you, what is it that you want to tell investors at this stage? Are you going to allay fears? Are you going to say we will go ahead with the recommendations? What are you going to do at this stage?
Well, good evening, Supriya. Glad to be on ET now again. The first thing I would like to tell all investors is that they should actually take a deep breath and relax. Because, of course, there are many external factors, what's happening in China, what the Fed might do and so on, some of which might be legitimate, some of which may be just blips that shouldn't concern us too much. But as far as India is concerned, as the Honorable Prime Minister has said over and over again, as the Honorable Finance Minister has said over and over again, our overriding priority is to ensure that we create jobs, we have economic growth, and we have an excellent business and investment environment. So obviously with that as our overriding priority, we want to make sure that there isn't anything that will unnecessarily spook the markets.
Right.
Now with respect to your question about the SIT recommendations, they are a very capable group of people. They are looking very closely at a whole host of black money issues. Obviously we are all very concerned, not just in India, but I was in Addis Ababa for the Financing for Development conference.
Right.
And I can tell you right across the world today, there is a lot of concern about illicit financial flows. So around the world, whether it's the OECD, the UN, the G20, there are many measures that are being put in place to ensure that financial flows are tracked and monitored appropriately. So what the SIT is doing is in that context. So we will obviously consider their inputs, but of course whatever we do is intended to ensure that we have an excellent business and investment environment in India.
So the view from North Block really is that these are only recommendations. A decision has still not been taken. That's the unanimous opinion that we're getting from you, we're getting from your boss, we are also getting from various bureaucrats in North Block. It is still causing panic, and which is why I'm going to ask you a question on, the street is certainly very nervous on P-notes. Is the government worried about the reaction that it can cause? Is the government worried about the possible exodus on account of the P-note scare?
I'll tell you how it should be, to my mind, having been in the markets myself for decades, which is that as government, we have to be able to provide a stable and predictable policy regime. And that deals with all aspects of issues that pertain to the market. So whether it is regulation around P-notes and capital flows, whether it's the currency, whether it's monetary policy, overall our goal, as I said earlier, is to ensure that we have an excellent business and investment environment. And for that, a stable and predictable regime is very important. So I don't think the market should overreact in the way that you're telling me that people are. I mean, I think people are much wiser than that. So I'm not supposing that they have been spooked. But if indeed people are considering these issues, they should recognize that the government is going to take into account all considerations and take into account all factors. Today, P-notes are about 11% of the capital flows coming into the markets. Obviously, they're an important element of our capital markets. And so we are going to try and make sure that we can offer a stable, predictable, and best-in-class regulatory and policy regime for our investors and business people.
You know, the bears that took charge on the Lal Street, and I'm kind of using idioms here, the bears who took charge on the Lal Street are alluding to the fact that rules cannot change midway, and which is why I think they're very worried that could P-note be regulated. I'm asking you another question. You know, if it was another report, and I think one of the reasons why market is reacting to this report is if it was another report, they would have realized that the government would not want to vitiate the investor climate. But this is a Supreme Court monitored SIT report, and which is why people are nervous that, you know, maybe the government will have to accept it far more than it would have had to accept any other report. Is that something that's binding on you as well?
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I mean, like I said, there are many considerations that come into play. What the SIT is suggesting is one set of considerations. I think all in all, what they are suggesting, which is to have better KYC on P-notes, makes quite a bit of sense. Of course, none of us want a situation where there is round tripping of money coming into India. We absolutely don't want that, because that in effect is, a violation of our policies. It is in fact illicit financial flows and so on, which, as I said, all around the world people are cracking down on. So naturally we don't want that. We want to know who the ultimate beneficiaries are, where the money is coming from. Everybody does. But as long as those regulations and those norms are met, I think we are very welcoming of all legitimate capital flows.
So these are the supporters of P-notes, they're detractors, and they believe that why is it that the government has to roll backwards and invite all kinds of foreign capital? Why is it that the government lacks the teeth for surgical operations, so to say? Who is going to do it after all? And which is why I'm going to ask you this question that you have rightly pointed out, and you, from a policy making point of view, you're absolutely right to say that, the KYC norms that we're trying to get is all measures aimed at regulating P-notes. You want to know the ultimate beneficiary. Otherwise, it's more like a Benami transaction, so to say. In this case, I think what people want to know from you is, to what length will you go to regulating P-notes? Because this is an important instrument of investment. I think that's the sense that people want to gauge from Finance Ministry.
No, again, we have to take into account what the global norms are, Supriya, because we operate in a global economy, and we want to make sure that our capital markets, our policy environment is not just at global standards, but in fact is best in class. And you will find around the world, when capital flows are regulated, they are monitored, then the KYCs are a very essential aspect of that. That's all we are talking about here, nothing more, nothing less. And that's the way we are looking at it.
Is the SIT recommendation in some sense a lot more sweeping than the policy maker in you would want it to be? Because you realize the repercussions of trying to do what the SIT recommendations are. I mean, your policy making is not utopian. It can't be done with one sway. It can't be done overnight.
What I would suggest here is for you and for all the viewers is to take a step back and to really recognize the manner in which policy making is done. The manner in which policy making is done, and which is, I think, absolutely the appropriate way, is to be able to ask every stakeholder what they think is the right way to go about setting a policy would be. As far as the P-notes are concerned, the SIT and illicit financial flows are very important stakeholder in the process, but they are a stakeholder. There are other stakeholders as well, and ultimately, as stewards of the economy, as custodians of the people's faith, our most important priority, as I said, is to ensure that we have an economy that is growing, that is doing well, we are creating jobs and so on. So like I said, we have to hear all these different voices, we have to get the expert input from the SIT, we have to carefully consider what they're saying, but at the end of the day, we have to put all of that together and then make and formulate our policy.
I think that's a valid point, and that will allay some fears and soothe some frayed nerves. But I'm going to now, I've been batting for the investors, so to say, till some time, but I'm now going to be the devil's advocate. And your detractors say that there's some kind of a fatal embrace that the government and markets are in. Each time you say the word P-note, whether it was years back or whether it's today, there is always a knee-jerk reaction. There's always this fear created that there will be outflows. Today, from the point of view where we are a bright spot. It's not just you who says it, and you have every business to say it, but it's the IMF, the World Bank, everybody's been saying it for a while. Our economy is doing well. Isn't our economy doing well enough to attract flows, even if you were to clamp down on money that comes via the P-notes route, which a lot of stakeholders are not comfortable with?
Yeah, but again, I think, Supriya, that's what I wanted you to kind of take that step back and again tell your viewers to take a step back, because, government policy, as I said, particularly because we want it to be stable and predictable and fair, is not about responding to some anxiety or some overheated comment or the other. It is really to be able to fashion a course that is mature, that is got some long-standing and long duration aspect to it as well, so that it is not just driven one way or the other way. So we want to have a stable policy, a policy that is in place for a period of time, and as a result of that, we obviously have to ensure that whether it is one set of voices or another set of voices, they don't hijack the debate.
That's
that we are able to do it in a balanced way.
Fair point indeed. I have one last question on P-notes and the scare that it has caused before I move on. You know, for all the right reasons, your electoral campaign did talk a lot about clamping down on black money. You did not just get eyeballs, you also got the votes, and 282 perhaps reflects that. In policy making and in practical life, is that very difficult to implement?
No, I absolutely don't think so. I think it's a false trade-off to think that if you actually cut back on corruption, that you are tough on black money, that you stop these illicit financial flows, that it will be damaging to the economy. In fact, it will be the opposite. Because once we have a level playing field, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, minimum government, maximum governance, we have a policy-driven, rules-based state, that will encourage more capital flows, that will encourage more businesses to invest, that will enable consumers to be able to spend freely and without fear, and that will drive the economy forward. Supriya, one of the very I think terrific things that is happening now is on FDI and of course FPI as well.
That's right.
If you look at FDI is up 48%, you know, when you compare it to a comparable period last year. And that is up because people have confidence in our policies. They have confidence, as I was saying to you earlier, that our policies are going to be well thought out, they're going to be long lasting, that we are not going to be hijacked by, you know, one interest group or another interest group. It's going to reflect all of these different considerations, and that we will maintain that consistency. Honorable Finance Minister has said that many times, and that is precisely why we are able to attract both foreign as well as domestic investment into India. That is all growing, that is all developing nicely right now, and that demonstrates that if you are in fact cutting down on corruption, you're actually bolstering growth.
Actually, you've answered my question in many ways, more than one, but I still want to ask you, you know, you have yourself said FDI has grown at over 48% in the same period last year. Why is it then that you need this money that's coming in from P-notes? I know you do not want a certain voice to hijack the debate, which right now is the voice of fear, but, you know, many people believe that India is safely placed right now. You know, nobody is going to dispute the fact that our macros are a lot better this year than they were the same period last year or even the year before that.
And Supriya, micro is also benefiting because the macro is doing well. And again, the macro is doing well because, again, our cardinal principles, stability, predictability, mature response,
bearing fruit.
That's right. It's exactly that approach to policy making that we've demonstrated with respect to all these other issues, which is of course this very sort of, I think, mature and balanced approach, taking into account all considerations, that is paying off, which will pay off, I think, when it comes to you know, this debate about P-notes, when it comes to worrying about the monsoon. I remember when the discussion about the monsoon was beginning in early June, everybody was worried about, you know, what's going to happen.
I want to turn the focus and talk about the MAT report. It's still not been made public. The question is, I'm not asking you any details from the report. Why are you shying away from making it public? You've been very transparent in how you've dealt with policy making so far.
No,
we have
been very transparent in the manner in which we are making policy. We've been very transparent in terms of consulting with all stakeholders. But there is a time for deliberation as well. We've just received the Shah Committee report. Give us a few days. Parliament is in session. We've been busy with many things right now. Give us a few days to be able to put together our overall perspective. And then, of course, as you know, the Supreme Court is going to be dealing with this matter shortly.
That's
so
right.
we will very soon have a point of view on this.
The AP Shah panel report is not made public, but we are given to understand. I'm not going to, I keep sources sacrosanct, so I'm just going to say we've been given to understand he's thrown his weight behind no MAT on FIIs. The question is that why is this report restricted only to FIIs? This is, of course, you know, prevalent knowledge now. Why not broad-based? Why was it not broad-based to private equity and all of those other participants? That's something that market participants have been questioning.
Well, that's how the terms of reference were set up, and so we have to respect that.
I know you will not divulge any details from this report, but I have a question to ask of you. In some sense, are you in a bind of sorts because of the legalities around it? There are notices that have been issued. The position has been that let us not tax them going forward. There is a Supreme Court case that's on. Does that bind you in terms of taking a decision on the report per se?
Well, obviously this is a sub judice matter. The Supreme Court is taking a look at that. You know, the Castleton case is underway. So there are a number of judicial aspects to this and legal aspects to this that we as a lawful government, as a government that believes in due process, is I think as I said earlier, mature and balanced in our approach, is obviously going to have to take into account as well. And so that's why as we are thinking through the contents of the report and their recommendations, we want to absolutely make sure, and of course the Honorable Finance Minister is one of India's most eminent lawyers, and is probably the best person to take all of that into account as he formulates the government's response. But that's precisely why we have to be able to do it in a measured way.
Mr. Sinha, if I know you well, I know you don't want to talk much about a sub judice case, but I still have to ask you this. 680 crores at stake, is a retrospective relief going to be possible? Is it going to be easy to give, even though in principle people expect you to give that relief?
Well, we'll have to wait and see for that.
All right. I want to turn focus and talk to you about something that continues to grab headlines every time it's been spoken about, which is your wonderful relationship with the RBI. Are you trying to clip their wings? Are you not trying to clip their wings? Are you on warpath or are you friends? We'll find that out from you in just a moment. But where are things as far as the RBI and North Block are concerned on the veto power? The FSLRC that you put out has created havoc of sorts, because many people believe you're again back to clipping the governor's wings. Let's hear it from you. I think every time those terms amuse you.
No, they do amuse me, because what I find is that in the media and perhaps in the markets as well, this is something that takes up a lot of time and people spend a lot of time speculating about these matters. But again, it's a very straightforward issue, which is that there are various reports, there are various inputs that come into North Block in terms of perspectives on various matters. And then of course the FSLRC has put out a draft report, which is their perspective on how a variety of matters should be handled. And among them is the issue of the Monetary Policy Committee, where they've laid out kind of how they think it should operate. That's one input. We've obviously received the input of the Urjit Patel report in the past as well. Obviously we've had many consultations with the RBI, with Dr. Rajan on this matter. We've obviously spoken to many of our colleagues across the world. In fact, I was with the US Treasury Secretary recently, where I did discuss how their monetary policy works as well. We've been in discussions with our colleagues in the UK and so on. So, in any of these situations, as I was saying earlier, our goal is to be able to consider all aspects, to bring together, all the different perspectives from various stakeholders, and then at the appropriate time, when we feel like we have come up with a thoughtful approach to the matter, then actually formulate policy.
So you're essentially saying that this is going to be one of the points into deliberation. This is not the last we've heard as far as that veto power is concerned. The question...
No, that's exactly right. I just want to clarify that again. We've received many inputs. We've consulted with many stakeholders, and obviously all of this will be taken into consideration. Unfortunately, what I found in the media is that many people have sort of said that this is the government's report. This is not the government's report. This is the report of the FSLRC, and that is only an input into the government's thing.
And in fact, if you actually see the FSLRC report, it was an 11-member committee. 1 died, 1 sick, 1 didn't attend. Of the 8 members, 4 gave a dissent note. So this is in some sense a minority report of sorts. The reason I'm asking you this question is, and why not quash this debate for once and for all? This is the second draft that has come in from FSLRC. It is very skewedly weighed in favor of the government as far as monetary policy is concerned, and yet it wants to hold the RBI responsible for inflation management. There's a reason why the top boss at RBI calls it schizophrenic of sorts. The question I'm asking you is, why persist with the IFC then? I mean, why not quash this altogether? Because it continues to cause this friction.
I think you have to separate out the Monetary Policy Committee from the IFC. The IFC is a much more broad-ranging sort of assessment. And there what they're trying to do is to look at the overall financial architecture, look at the role of the various regulators, look at the role of the Ministry of Finance, and try and say what are the specific roles that various different entities should play, taking into account the entire financial architecture. The Monetary Policy Committee is one part of that. It's very useful to have a wide-ranging report like that, because obviously it gives you a full comprehensive perspective on how things can in fact be constructed. But this was a process that started in 2011. It's been underway for some time. As you said, the committee itself has turned over quite a bit. So we are taking all of that into consideration as we look into this. But again, I will want to reiterate what I said right at the outset, which is that the Honorable Prime Minister and the Honorable Finance Minister have said that economic growth, jobs, and excellent investment in business environment are our overriding priorities. So we will absolutely not go down the track where we end up jeopardizing any of that. And I think that should be very reassuring to investors, to business people that are looking to grow and expand their businesses in India.
So you've actually given me a headline there, essentially saying this is not the last word we've heard on veto, and of course deliberations are still on, because your own monetary policy framework does talk about RBI and Deputy Governor having a final say on monetary policy.
No, it's very much an open issue right now.
Fair point indeed.
Yeah.
Before I move any further, I want to discuss GST, because that's a crying reform that India Inc. wants and everybody's been looking at it. I have one last question to ask of you. I may not get a direct answer out of you in my past experiences, but I'm going to still make a try. The monetary policy is right around the corner. Monsoon, thankfully, has been normal. We were fretting over it in the month of June, but the rain gods have been kind. Food inflation has been largely under control. Is the time right and ripe for a rate cut? Because you keep talking about growth, you keep talking about job creation, and the cost of capital is a concern.
Well, the market's been lecturing us on what the role of the RBI and what the role of the government is. So I will take that advice to heart, and this is the role of the RBI. The RBI is best positioned. They are, obviously very, very good at their job, and they are studying and understanding all of these various different inputs that really determine their view on monetary policy. So let's wait and see.
As someone who's been an investor and who understands macroeconomies and policy making right now, your own view, should the RBI have a final say on the monetary policy? I'm going back to the veto issue. I know that you've said it's one of the many...
On this, Supriya, we have to go back to first principles. We've said over and over again that to grow the economy, to create jobs, we need to have a stable, predictable policy regime, and that includes monetary policy, fiscal policy, where we are with currency. Now, we found, and this is the empirical evidence, that an independent central bank that is tasked with monetary policy, that is taking into account all the data and then coming to their professional judgment in a technocratic fashion, right? Because after all, they have control of the printing press in this regard, is in fact the best way to go. I mean, all of the evidence points in that direction. Therefore, and this is really the principle that we have to really take into account, an independent central bank with ability to be able to figure out and decide on monetary policy is vitally important for India.
And RBI is perhaps one of the best regulators that we can boast of globally. I have two quick last questions to ask you. One is, this is GST, a reform that's been in the making for long. It's unfortunate that there's still political bickering on it. What a lot of people are, however, questioning is that the format in which the GST Select Panel has now submitted its report, which keeps alcohol, petroleum and tobacco out, at least for now, shrinks your tax database considerably. Is that something which worries you? Because you talk about, the tax collections in India and how they are very low.
It's very, very tragic right now that India's larger national interest is being hijacked and damaged in this fashion by petty politics. So every party now, virtually without, almost without exception, is saying that the GST is in the larger national interest. We should absolutely implement it. We are ready to do it. We have said that when it comes to all the implementation matters, we have that well in hand. April 1, 2016 can absolutely be accomplished. Now, given all of that, given that everything has been set up to be able to do this, to find that Parliament is being disrupted and not allowed to work day after day is just an immense tragedy for India.
How confident are you that this is going to go through?
Well, it's very hard to say right now because, it really is being driven by the whims and fancies of a very small group of people. And for the country to be held hostage to that, I think, is a real tragedy. And it's really a tragedy because, what people don't realize is that we have to create 10 million jobs every year. And every year that our economic growth is not at potential, these young people are not getting jobs.
Jobless, yes.
And we already have a huge backlog of people that have not got jobs in the last 5, 6, 7 years of, terrible economic performance. And so the backlog keeps building. And every month, every day that we lose, we are losing in terms of jobs, in terms of health for our people, in terms of opportunities for people. So it really is, I personally as a first-time MP, in the hallowed halls of Parliament to see what is going on, it
disappoints you at one level.
It just brings you to despair.
I'm quite certain it disappoints you because it disappoints me to say why isn't the biggest reform going through. The question is that even if it were to go through in this session, Is it practical to assume that GST can be a reality on the 1st of April?
Absolutely. Everything is everything is in place. We have done a lot of work on the revenue neutral rate and the analytics behind it. We've done a lot of work on the systems. We work with the states. We are consulting with all kinds of stakeholders. I myself am spending a lot of time monitoring all of that. We are absolutely able to do all of this. Now we just need Parliament and particularly the opposition party to recognize that it is in the national interest to do this.
We do hope that the national interest paramounts everything else. Thanks very much for speaking to us. I called you the voice of sanity and you've been rather steady in this interview. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.